What's up, everybody? I'm Jane Sawyer, and this is Jane Sawyer Makes a Custom Sketchbook. I just got myself a new sketchbook. When I buy myself a sketchbook, I always get the spiral bound kind. This is for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I just like how the spiral binding lays perfectly flat when the book is open. And secondly, whenever I've invested in a lovely, beautiful bound sketchbook with a nice cover, I've always been kind of paralyzed in fear to actually use it. I get this silly feeling that if I do a drawing I don't like in a beautiful bound sketchbook, somehow I've polluted it with ugliness and ruined the whole thing. Let me know in the comments if you sometimes have this irrational fear. I don't seem to have this paralysis when I use a spiral bound sketchbook because I can just rip out the page and no one will ever know it was there. Anyhow, my plan is to cut a new cover for this sketchbook, decorate it, and then open the spirals to slide it on so that I can have a spiral bound sketchbook with a pretty cover.
I'm going to use the chipboard from the back of this empty watercolor paper pad for the cover of my new sketchbook. I cut a rectangle down to size, and then I'm transferring the measurements to locate the holes for the wire binding. A good tip here is to put an X in the material you're going to remove to keep yourself on track. Once I located the holes, I started cutting them out with a craft knife. This is what I did for the first cover I made, but I lost that footage. As I was cutting out this second one for camera, I thought I could probably drill through this chipboard, so I gave it a go and it worked. So if you have access to a drill and you want to do this is probably a quicker way to cut the holes. I cleaned up the holes with a bit of sandpaper and re-rounded them with a twist of a pencil. Before moving on, I gave everything 2 coats of gesso, which I probably could have skipped, and 2 coats of black acrylic paint. While that's drying, I drew up a plan for how I wanted to decorate my cover. I pulled a few inspiration pictures from Pinterest. I'll link these all in the description, or you can follow me on Pinterest. I have all this and more saved on my profile. Here's my final drawing. Initially, I was going to paint this on, but after looking at the inspiration photos, I ultimately decided that I wanted to sculpt this out of polymer clay. I slide my drawing under this plastic placemat I have fixed to my work surface. It would have been smarter to use a sheet of glass here, like from a picture frame, so I could have put that glass directly into my oven, but I didn't think of that then. Either way, I was able to put my drawing underneath the plastic and build with my clay directly on top. I used small amounts of aluminum foil to build a foundation for the tree trunks and crowns. Then I started building on top of the foil with Super Sculpey.
If you do want to do this for yourself and you don't want to invest in a whole pound of Super Sculpey, you could probably get away with a 2-ounce pack of black Sculpey III. This would both save you a few bucks and save you the time of having to base coat everything in black.
The sculpting is a lot more simple than it looks. I of course conditioned my clay, then I flattened down some sausage shapes to lay over the foil for the tree bark. The trick now is to break everything down into simple shapes. This spot here looks kind of triangular-ish, so I put a triangular-ish blob of clay here. The branches and roots look like tiny snakes, so I blended some tiny snakes for roots and branches. I sculpted the opposite tree in just the same manner as the first, and I added the knot hole in the tree by blending in a few little coils of clay, keeping in mind the grain lines of the bark and dimpling in the hole with a round-ended tool. With the crowns of the trees, I didn't want to get into sculpting individual leaves, so I shaped some roughly cloud-shaped blobs and textured them with some scrunched up aluminum foil and my triangular tipped rubber tool. I used polyclay adhesive to stick everything down to the foil.
At this point, it's definitely looking cute and detailed, so I could totally stop here. But no, if it's worth building, it's worth overbuilding, so I'm gonna go crazy with the details.
This is my favorite part, so I really went overboard. If you make this, you can add as many or as few details as you like. Just keep in mind, when it comes to tiny details, as long as there are a lot of them, none of them have to actually be very good. I made these little fungi by rolling a few sizes of clay balls, squashing them, then cutting them in half. Little triangle shapes make some blades of grass I tucked between the two trees. I pre-baked some teeny tiny snakes of clay for these mushroom stems, then popped on a flattened ball of clay for the mushroom cap. I added a small cluster of flat-capped mushrooms. I made a couple of ferns. I rolled a whole bunch of tiny balls to scatter some pebbles among the roots. I laid down some super thin patches of clay and then scratched them with a pokey tool to make moss.
I just went detail wild.
Here it is out of the oven, nice and firm. I base coated it in black acrylic and let it dry really well. I used my favorite dollar store 5-minute epoxy to stick it down to my chipboard cover. I score through the paint into the cardboard a bit, stir up my epoxy really well, then slop it on the back of my sculpt with a stir stick. I seat it down onto the cover with some firm, gentle pressure and let that epoxy set up overnight. Before moving on, I inserted the new cover into my book. I flipped my sketchbook face down, put a little piece of squishy foam down, then laid my new cover face down onto the foam. I used my finger to gently pull the wires out, slide my cover in, and pop the wires back through the hole. I did this all the way down and used some pliers to tighten any wires I might have pulled loose. And then boom, you flip the new cover to the front, your binding is all intact, and you're ready to go.
At this point, I made any repairs I needed to. Some roots had broken off and I glued those back on. And then I touched up the paint where any epoxy had squeezed out or it needed a little touch up. I wanted to keep my final paint job really simple, so I took some inspiration from my reference photos and let my texture really shine. So I decided to dry brush everything with a warm metallic copper.
Here's how I dry brushed my finish. Loaded a soft, fluffy brush with metallic copper paint, dabbed most of it off on a paper towel, then applied just a whisper kiss of pressure to brush paint onto my sculpture. This leaves all the recesses of the sculpt in the original base coat of black, which makes the textures pop and gives everything a gritty, rich, aged feel. I tried out a few options for the title. Ultimately, edit undoing them with black paint. I ended up pulling out these metal alphabet stamps I have. They are meant for stamping sheet metal, but they worked really great on a scrap of chipboard and had the look I was going for. So to use these, you just strike the little stamp with a hammer and it presses the letter into the cardboard. Then I used the same dry brush effect to highlight those letters and glued my little placard in place.
And that's a wrap on my sketchbook project. Give me a like if you think I did a good job, and make sure you're subscribed if you want to see what I get up to next. I'm going to be posting new videos here as often as possible. You can follow me online on TikTok, Instagram, and Pinterest. I'm Jane Sawyer Makes on all platforms. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next one. On to the beauty shop.